So what's the mission? To keep people from going in the gorge?
No. You need to stop what's in the gorge from coming out.
What the hell is that?
The gorge is the door to hell. And we're standing guard at the gate.
The Gorge is a new romance action flick that hit streaming the other day. The movie is directed by Scott Derrickson, who's given us some great horror films in the past, like the movie Sinister and The Black Phone. The movie stars Miles Teller as a character named Levi, and it also stars Anya Taylor-Joy as a character named Drasha. And in this film, you find out that while these two have never met, they don't know each other at all, they have very similar backgrounds. And that background is being ex-military and now essentially a mercenary for the highest bidder. They're both very good at what they do, and that's basically shooting at targets many miles away. So they both get recruited by this corporation to take on a job where they will be guarding a gorge from separate guard shacks. Again, they don't know each other. In this job description, they are told they're not allowed to have any communication with the outside world, and they're not allowed to have communication with the person in the other guard shack. Again, that person's over there, you're over here, shoot what's coming out of the gorge, that's all you need to know. And so you, the audience, go into this wondering what's in the gorge as much as the people in the watchtowers are wondering what's in the gorge. At one point, a character tells Miles Teller he's not sure what's down there. He's been guarding it for the past year, and he believes it might be a gateway to hell. And since the director of this film, Scott Derrickson, has that background in horror with movies like Sinister, there's a good possibility it could be a gateway to hell. And so you watch as both Drasha and Levi from different sides are shooting at these things that are trying to come out of the gorge. They're blowing them up as they try to come out of the gorge. But again, this movie isn't just an action movie, it's also a romance film. And while they're not supposed to have communication with each other, well, they see each other with binoculars. They're both young, good-looking people. And so, as you can imagine, they start flirting with each other, and it's innocent enough at first. They're looking at each other with binoculars. They're holding up signs to each other, talking to each other remotely, and they start having drum-offs, just little things like that. But as their relationship progresses, they find a way to actually meet up with each other and accidentally end up in the gorge, where they have to fight their way out and maybe find some answers as to what the gorge is all about. And that is the best synopsis that I can give you for The Gorge. If that sounds like an interesting setup for a film, well, you can go check this movie out. It is streaming now on Apple Plus. So if you have an Apple Plus membership, you can watch this movie for free. And I'm going to get into my positives and negatives here in a second. But before I do that, if this is the first time you found my channel, well, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button. Check out all the different content on my channel. Maybe you like movie reviews just like this, or you like Blu-ray talk. I've got a bunch of them back there. Love making videos about those. And I've got a ton of ranked list videos on my channel. So again, if you like somebody talking about movies, I'd love for you to check out the rest of my channel and maybe even consider hitting that subscribe button. All right, guys, let's get into my positives and my negatives for The Gorge. My first positive for this movie actually comes from the romance angle of this film, and that would be the chemistry between both Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy's characters of Drasha and Levi, because I thought both of them had incredible chemistry. I bought into their relationship. I loved how it started with just a glance of binoculars from each other, where they're like, oh, that person's kind of good looking. You know, they have no idea who's on the other side of this gorge in the other watchtower. Just turns out to be somebody that's good looking and that they're kind of interested in. And then I loved the little bit of flirting back and forth. The drum off scene was really fun too. It just kind of worked for me that this relationship started to blossom in such a dark place where your job is to literally kill things that are coming out of a valley, no questions asked. And so I thought that was a really nice way to start their relationship. And I even bought into the crazy things they did to try and meet up with each other. So their relationship worked for me. I thought that was one of the strongest points of this entire movie. The chemistry between those two characters was great. And my other positive is the other genre that this movie is built into, and that of course is the action genre. I thought some of the action in this was so cool, especially at first when they're just trying to figure out what these things are and they're taking shots at them. These things coming out of the gorge are disgusting looking, they're gross, and so they're shooting at them, they're blowing them up, you see pieces of these things fall. But again, like I said earlier, when they get into the gorge and they're taking these things on, there's all kinds of stuff, including some spiders, and you guys know I'm not a big fan of spiders, and so these spiders are running up on them and they're having to shoot at them. There's just some deformed looking things down in this gorge, and it's really fun to watch. So I thought that the action side of this and the romance side of this worked really well, which makes a lot of sense because this movie came out right at the Valentine's weekend, and so people are looking for a romance action flick maybe to watch as a couple together. You got a guy that likes some action, a girl that likes some romance, or maybe flip-flop that, a guy that likes some romance, a girl that likes some action. That's fine. And they want to watch a movie together. This one might be the perfect movie to give both of the people what they're looking for. And my final positive for this movie, and really something that leads into my first negative, so we'll start on the positive side. And my final positive for this movie is that I love how this movie holds its cards pretty close, doesn't really reveal much to the viewer, lets you try to figure it out as you go along for at least the first 2 acts. And that also gives the movie the time to build that romantic relationship, because you, the viewer, are not sure what's going down in the gorge, so you have to just focus on what they're giving you. And since you have that romantic relationship that's sort of blossoming in this really dark place, well, it makes for a compelling viewing, because you're like, okay, they're having this great relationship, but what's going to go on? There's also some stuff that I haven't spoiled that you see happen to some other characters, and you're like, okay, well, I'm really glad these two are finding romance right now. And so there's some things that happen between the two of them in those first 2 acts that really resonates, because they don't tell you too much about what's going on in the gorge. That'll lead me to my negatives, though, and my first negative is that when they do reveal what's going on in the gorge, and they reveal all of it, they give you, the viewer, way too much information. They dump so much exposition on you, and they dump so much plot on you in the final act that it almost feels overwhelming with all of the action they're also giving you. Now, this is a romance action film. I do want answers, but I felt like they could have found a way to reveal those answers to us a little bit better throughout the film, instead of just hitting you at one time in the 3rd act with all of the answers that you're looking for in the gorge. Again, between all of the answers and all of the action, and you do get a lot of action in the 3rd act, there's just way too much going on. There's also a third party that gets involved a little bit in the 3rd act, and so again, way too much going on in the 3rd act, especially the fact that they held so much of it back for the first 2 acts and then just dump it all on you. That'll lead to my next negative, and this may be because of how they dumped so much on you in that 3rd act between the action and the exposition, but I feel like this movie goes on too long. Now, the movie only clocks in at 2 hours and 7 minutes, and again, that first 2 acts is really building what's in the gorge, what's going on with their relationship, will they, won't they. It builds a lot of that, but again, when you get to that 3rd act, they give you so much, they dump so much on you, that the movie really feels off when it comes to the pacing of the entire film. And so again, it only clocks in at 2 hours and 7 minutes, but it feels so much longer than that, because you're just waiting to get there, and when you get there, it's way too much at once. So I feel like that also affected the runtime and the pace of this film. And that'll lead me to my last negative for this film, and that is that while I enjoyed the relationship of the main characters, I personally never felt like there was any real danger on those 2 characters. At one point, something happens with a zip line, and that was at one point where I was like, oh, okay, maybe some danger will happen here. When no real danger comes out of that, I was like, all right, I no longer fear for the lives of these 2 main characters. I feel like they have so much plot armor. One, because they're really the only characters outside of these creatures that are in the bulk of this movie. And 2, just because they're also the romantic part of this movie. And so you don't have all these extra characters or cannon fodder characters and be like, oh man, that guy was the funny guy of the group. It's too bad he died. No, there's just 2 people. And so the fact that those 2 people are there kind of gives them a lot of plot armor. And so you, the viewer, have a hard time ever feeling like either one of them is in any real danger. Even though they go up against some nasty things in the gorge, some spiderish things, even though they go up against a lot of nasty stuff, you never feel like, oh, you know what? I feel like these guys are in danger. You just don't feel that. Overall, unfortunately for this movie, I feel like it's incredibly forgettable. When I get to the end of this month and I'm ranking movies, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, The Gorge came out. Where am I going to rank this? Because it's not a bad movie. It's a well-made movie. It's a well-produced movie. You could tell Apple's got so much money. They threw a ton of money at this thing. So it's not a badly made movie. It's an interesting enough plot, but something about this movie just feels forgettable. And I can't explain that more than just my own personal feelings. Walking away from this movie, I was like, oh yeah, I watched The Gorge last night. I should do a quick reaction for this. Like, they just didn't stick with me as much. And I'm shooting a review for it now, but I can imagine that in a week from now, when I'm doing my all of February ranked video, I'll be like, kind of forgettable. And that's how I feel about this. It's another streaming movie that's kind of forgettable. Kind of makes sense why they didn't throw this movie in theaters, because it feels a bit forgettable. I don't know if I'll recommend this to people down the line, and I don't think I'd want to revisit this later on this year. I don't think I'll go back and be like, oh, let me rewatch The Gorge. That was a fun time. Because it wasn't that it wasn't a fun time. It just didn't get me there, didn't get me excited. By the third act, I was exhausted. But guys, those are just my opinions because that's my review for The Gorge. Have you had a chance to see this film yet? If you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if you enjoyed the movie, you didn't like the movie, maybe we agree or disagree on some of my positives and negatives. I'd love to know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. And finally, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my The Gorge review. Hope you guys had a great time watching this video. I had a good time watching the movie, had an even better time making this review. I was hoping for a little bit of more horror out of this film. Yeah, some of the creature designs are kind of horrific, but from Scott Derrickson, I expected a little more horror, and that's too bad. But with that said, if you want to check out any of my horror movie reviews, well, I've got all of those right there. And if you want to check out any of my 2025 movie reviews, well, I've got all those right there.